Great, we might get started. So welcome everyone from wherever you are, whatever time zone you may be joining us to this panel discussion. And actually, we're not calling this a panel discussion, we're calling it a radical playground. So with that in mind, we want this to be quite informal, playful. And instead of panelists, we've got players in the playground who you'll be introduced to imminently, all coming from various backgrounds and various places across the industry. And yeah, as I said, we really want this to be quite informal. So please do interact with us via the Q&A or chat if you have access to that. We'd love to hear your questions, reflections, comments, anything you like, just to keep interacting with us throughout the dialogue. And throughout this session today, we're going to be unpacking radical play. So what this means through the lens of connection and reconnection, especially at this moment in time, activism, so how play can create change, and innovation. So I guess how play is so central to that space of innovation with risk and experimentation. And to give everyone a little bit of context about why we're here today and why we're talking about play. So each year here at the School of Media and Communication at the London College of Fashion, we do what's called a Zeitgeist Workshop at the end of the academic year, where we bring together staff, so academics, industry, and students and alumni into a space where we try to co-create an understanding of the zeitgeist, or the spirit of now, and particularly in relation to our industries. So here at our school, that's the industries of media, communications, and the performance industries. And through that session, we then analyze what emerges and come up with a theme that we feel best encapsulates the zeitgeist. And then we integrate that through our curriculum and into units in the way that we teach students, but also through community building exercises that we do with staff and students in the college, online, here in this radical playground. And also we bring some of this knowledge out into the community, so out externally. The very first year we did this, we were exploring the philosophy of the anti-fragile. Last year, we were exploring pleasure activism, and this year it's that of radical play. So this is really the very first event that you're all so welcome to. And just to say, we're not really here to kind of disseminate what kind of radical play means. This is the very first event where we're starting to gain a better and stronger understanding of radical play. So in this session, we're starting that with our external friends, networks, and alumni that you see here on the screen. And in the context of this theme, we acknowledge that not knowing and the unknown is central to where we find ourselves during this period of time where we are navigating what feels like a never-ending loop of a pandemic and post-pandemic reality. And it is from this space that we question, what is the impact of this uncertainty to our bodies? What have we lost and what have we gained? And what tools are available for us to ensure that we are equipped for this emergence towards a horizon that feels closer than ever before? In anticipation for this horizon ahead, can we increase our capacity to play and play with this moment in time? Play with all this ambiguity, play with intention, where we can reform our relationship with the unknown and play with possibility. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Shanu Walpita, who is a strategic futures director and lecturer here at the London College of Fashion. And she is going to unpack some of these questions and guide us deeper and further into this radical playground.
Hello. Welcome. Huge thanks, Daniel, for that wonderful introduction. Always so great at introducing things and contextualizing things for us. As Daniel said, I'm Shanu and I work here as a lecturer, but I'm also doing stuff outside, looking at what's happening around us in terms of the world and how the world is constantly changing and what's flexing and in flux. But before we kind of get into this, I wanted to kind of just extend a huge big welcome to all of you. Really appreciate your being here and taking the time to be with us to talk about what play means and what it can mean. And I'm also really, really honored to have the opportunity to kind of unpack what play is together with these amazing players or panelists. I'll let them introduce themselves in a second, but I just wanted to add a little bit of tiny context that Daniel's pretty much covered, but I just wanted to kind of reiterate that we see play as a kind of conduit or like a toolkit for lots of different things, including creativity, innovation, mistake making, iteration, finding joy, and so much more. And we'll be discussing all of those things in so much more detail imminently. And as Daniel said, we've been all collectively experiencing this kind of whiplash, cause and effect of these like polarizing states of like stasis and acceleration, thanks to 2.5 years of being in a pandemic. So we see this as kind of like a counter to the social isolation that we've all experienced. And play for us is this way to reconnect with ourselves, but also with each other. So like I mentioned, we've got these amazing players or panelists from various walks of life. So I'd like, obviously, for you guys to get to know them a bit. So we've asked them to all kind of present who they are, what they do, but also we've kind of asked them to consider like what an artifact of play would be for them, and also what it is and why they chose it. So without further ado, let's just get started. And let's start off with lovely, wonderful Teresa.
Hi, thank you, Shanu, and thank you, Daniel. Hi, everyone. My name is Teresa, and I am actually a LCF Creative Direction for Fashion graduate. I graduated 2 or 3 years ago, can't exactly remember, 2019. And now with my partner, we have a 3D studio. So 3D is the medium we work with. We have a 3D studio for 3D and direction for 3D called Morbo. And yeah, so we basically take on projects that have to do with 3D, but also we take 3D and explore it as a medium. So we try to explore what the possibilities it offers are, and this can be like VR, AR, and this can be stills, animations, all sorts of things. And as a studio, we tend to prioritize hiring females or queer people, non-binary people, and I think this conscious choice that we make has a huge impact also on the work that we produce. And so maybe I will talk about it a little bit later. I mean, now when I'm going to present my artifact. So just as a, thank you, Daniel. So just as a small introduction, I think play really goes hand in hand with the discipline that, with the discipline that we use, 3D. 3D for me, it's my job, but it's also my passion. So I try to combine play with the job that I do, basically. So yeah, here I've just put together a few things that inspire me to play. So it's a variety of things. I'm big mood boarding. I have a massive Pinterest arena, all sorts of things. I really like to put pieces together. So yeah, I guess I'm gonna start unpacking it. So on the left, I guess, I see on the left, I have 2 clips from the movie Brazil by Terry Gilliam. Then on the top also, there is another Terry Gilliam movie, Time Bandit. Then I have a book, The Master and Margarita by Bulgakov. And then we have Metamorphosis by Kafka. So I guess like the first thing I'd like to say is that I tend to play looking outside my discipline. And this is another big thing where I don't try to look for inspiration to play within 3D. I do think it kind of restricts me in a way. So I try to look for inspiration literally everywhere else. And the reason why I put these specific artifacts in here is because all of this, number one, were gifted or recommended to me by other people. And also these are the first things that I looked at when I was, I think, 16. And thanks to these things, I decided to go into a creative, down a creative path. I never took an art class actually until I was, I think, 19. So it was a bit of a big shift for me, but these are the elements that inspire me to go down art. And I guess I connect the idea of creating with the idea of play. So so just to unpack it, the reason why I chose Terry Gilliam, these two movies, is because this was actually suggested to me by my dad when I told him that I might have considered like a creative path. And to me, this really stayed with me, these two movies. Number one, because I watched them again with my dad while I was running a super high temperature, and they are quite like psychedelic in themselves. So to watch it while running a temperature was very crazy. But also one thing that I really love about these two movies is how absurd and how crazy they are. And to me, that is directly connected with the idea of play. Because when I play for myself, I don't really make things. It's more like a mind travel that I go through. I like to imagine things. I like to really think about things in depth, and I like to make visuals in my mind, and then I sketch them. So this is the process that I go through when I play. And to me, these two movies are a reminder of the unlimited possibilities that play offers without actually making. And the same kind of goes for The Master and Marguerite as well. For those who've read it, first of all, congratulations, because it's a massive book and it's really hard to go through the first part. But it is absolutely crazy. The things that happen in there are just, it takes a minute to kind of figure out what's going on in the story. But to me, when I was reading it, I could see the whole book in my mind, and the visuals were so crazy that even if I read it, I think it was about 6-7 years ago, I still have certain images so vivid in my mind. And it, again, the concepts that this book explores are so crazy, and sometimes I do see them in my work, even if I'm not explicitly thinking about them when I'm creating. But this really pushes me to kind of explore beyond, I guess, the visual. It pushes me to explore the concept, and that I really love. And the same kind of goes for The Metamorphosis. This is a fairly smaller book, but again, the story is really crazy. And when I read the book, I was really thinking, oh my God, I wonder how this idea even came into the author's mind. Like, I wonder what journey he went through while writing this book. It's so crazy. And again, also this one kind of reminds me every time to not limit myself when I'm playing with ideas. It really reminds me to kind of, be unhinged and just go explore concepts, explore visuals, explore ideas. And I guess also the fact, again, as I said in the beginning, that these books were gifted to me holds a significance to why I chose them. And that's because I do value so much the idea of collaboration, and I value so much the idea of communication and discussion with other people, other creatives. And maybe I can talk about this later, but I do think that some of my best works were done in collaboration with other people. And I don't think I would have come across these artifacts if somebody would have not recommended them to me. Or maybe the fact that they were recommended to me makes them even more important to me. So I guess to kind of sum it up, to me, the idea of play is not about making, but it's more about traveling with my mind and thinking and exploring concepts and visuals and ideas in my mind. And, sometimes I sketch them, sometimes I just have a massive archive of ideas in my mind. And the other key thing is, again, communication, collaboration, and really get to talk to people about what they like, what they're interested in, and to broaden my interest and my knowledge. And I apply this to my private practice, but also to my work practice. So in a way, the two are combined to me. I hope this is kind of exhaustive.
Wow, it's so cool. I mean, I love this idea of mind travel, and I want to go and process immediately, but I'm going to wait, obviously. And also this idea of exploring beyond the visual into the concept, I think is really fascinating. So, and collaboration. So wonderful stuff. Thank you so much, Teresa.
Thank you.
Next up is Carrie.
Hi.
Hello, hello.
I am Carri Munden. I had a brand called CassettePlaya for 10 years. And now I'm a freelance designer, creative director and stylist.
Wonderful. Tell us about what your, there it is.
So I've got loads of more sort of obvious. I was going around my home and my studio, and I've got lots of toys actually. I way too many toys actually, and lots of things. And then I wanted to be really instinctual in what I chose, and this is what I was drawn to. And I didn't really think about it too much until I started to create that page that you're seeing now, or when we had the discussions. But for me, I chose this because it's a really playful object. I bought it and everyone was always like, what is it? And I still don't really know what it is. I think it might be a replica of some 70s ashtray. It's ceramic, but to me it's really tactile. Like, it's fragile obviously, but I really want to pick it up. I love the shapes that it's, obviously a volcano creates amazing shapes. It's something that I've used a lot in my work actually, like volcanic activity and the textures that you get from it. But this obviously, I guess it's playful, but it's cold to the touch as well. I really like that. Actually, can you hear the noise as well? Like, actually my nails are all broken, but it's good. I don't know, it's just, for me, that is play. Play is really, I don't want to see childlike, because for me I feel like it's something that should stay with you throughout your life, and it's definitely something that stayed with me, and that is such a part of my life, but also my creative practice as well. And I've always been drawn to cultures where there is a lot of play still, and it is in throughout your life, not just maybe select Japan or like I think that it's about being instinctual, it's about being, like I said, tactile. It's very much about the senses and just being free, I think. And that's how I think of it.
I love it. I mean, I love this idea of you having all these things that you could choose from, and you kind of like going with your instincts and picking something that just felt right in the moment. And I think that's such a good example of play. It doesn't need to be something that's pre-planned. It's this thing that kind of just happens sometimes. So wonderful. I love it. I love that you also don't know what it is. It's so much bigger than I thought it would be. Yeah. It could be quite small, and then you held it up and it's massive. Maybe
it does remind me of like 60s and 70s design though, and I think that's an interesting time to look at, because I think designers were being really playful. And there was concepts of like utopia, but the objects for me are very I don't know, comforting, or like you want to interact with them basically.
Where did you get it?
I'm not like a minimalist, definitely not. So I like that period. Where did I get it from? I actually can't remember, like a gallery store somewhere. I actually can't remember.
You don't know if it's vintage. You don't even know who it's by or anything, right?
No.
I love that. That's wicked. Thank you so much for sharing. We've got Nate next.
Hi everyone. I'm the one who forgot to send through the picture, so I'm gonna have to come off sharing mode to present my object. But my name is Agbetu. I go by the pronouns he and they, and I am a creative strategist and a cultural producer. They seem quite lofty titles, but I like to build brand and community-focused projects that kind of take human truths and bring them to life in some form or shape. And yeah, I think play is really a part of how I move through the world. I think everyone said a bunch of keywords I would relate to myself, like definitely unhinged, and definitely always about playing. I have a creative studio at the minute called Play Nice, and the focus is like, how do we build intersections between communities? How do we like imagine our futures? Because I think imagination is a really key part of play. I feel like it's about, like, in my mind, play is about, imagination is very kinetic to me. It's about movement and things moving in unison, which we've spoken about before with like collaboration and stuff. But I think it's about your peers and understanding how things fit together. And yeah, kind of like looking to the future without any thoughts of the past, where we're going, is taking calculated risks and making something better of the world. So yeah, my object is this hand. Came at a really interesting point in my life. As you can tell, I've kind of broken one of the fingers a little bit. But yeah, in 2022, this is probably not so revolutionary, but in 2013, when I was actually 16 as well, I was actually gifted this, like by Machines Room, which was the first place I ever got a job. It was a makerspace, and it's 3D printed with like little cables in it, and I just loved the way that it kind of like made me imagine the future where, like, I guess now we're 3D printing organs and prosthetics and stuff very normally, but at the time this was like very much like disrupted distribution of like developing things yourself, and a makerspace being my first job was always amazing because it allowed me to be tactile and connect with the things that I imagined and created. I got to make light boxes, vinyls that I guess a lot of you might be using for your final shows and stuff, and just loads of things that added a bit more of a touch to what I was creating. So yeah, I thought a hand would be suited because you can, you know, can touch you and stuff. Yeah.
Amazing. Where does it actually live in your house? Is it like on a mantelpiece somewhere, or
Yeah, like it tends to move around the house sometimes. I mean, it's lived a little bit on my windowsill over there, or like upstairs in my bedroom. But yeah, it depends. I have a couple of playful things in my house. Like I got these like Lego flowers, and you can see my little lamp in the background. I like things I can just play with, so they just all move. I like to move my space around every month to get like a new perspective. So might change. You never know.
playing with spaces? I like it. What is it?
Yeah.
Does it remind you of something specific, like your first job, or is it like just a thing that you really like kind of instinctual, like what Carrie just said about picking it?
I think I like things that punch and pop and stand out for themselves. I do a lot of my work like with like affinity groups, people who like have a very key thing that ties them all together. That's really interesting. So I like that it just lives on its own and does its thing. And like usually, I have this which was from my first job in like the creative and cultural industry, where I kind of used to work at Wyden's. And there was this homeless guy outside who was making these wire sculptures. So I usually have this like kind of in it somewhere. So it's like hanging off of it. And it's just like this mechanical, like God complex type thing. Makes me just feel like you can be in charge of your reality and shape your reality a little bit. I like philosophy. So yeah,
Nice.
I kind of, it was the one.
I love that. That's wicked. It's like a visual of a philosophy, like or an ethos that you kind of think about. That's nice.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Nate. And finally, we've got last but not least, Danielle. Please tell us who you are, what you do, and also what your artifact is.
Hi, my name's Danielle Brathwaite-Shirley. I make video games that archive Black trans people usually. So usually I'm working with a team of just random Black trans people that are not specifically like video game trained or technically trained in any way. And then we build a team around them. Everyone gets paid and treated like a team member. And then we design and build a video game that is released. So that's usually what I do. But I thought as play, I would show what I do in my spare time when I am trying to test out new technologies that I'm finding out. And what I usually do, and if you'll become my friend, you will know, as I make a song for you and a music video, and I send it to you. So if you ever go on a date with me, or if you ever are close to me or I miss you, I'll make something using the new technology I'm looking at just to test it out, but at the same time, just to archive how much I actually miss you. And so I'm going to show one that I did for my friend. I hope this is okay.
Look at me standing. Turn my head to the right. Turn my head to the left. Fucking stunning. Look at me standing. Turn my head to the left. Turn my head to the right. Stunning. Yeah. Fucking gorgeous. Everything about you is fucking gorgeous. Looking at how beautiful you are. Body, top, mind. Everything about you is gorgeous. I never lost sight of it all. Yeah, I got your friendship first, and now I want you.
Yeah. So that was testing AI rotoscoping, so using an AI to like rotoscope out my body and replace it with all these like, images that you paint on top of it, as well as like trying to integrate some 3D with it. And I have one more if I have time, so I just really enjoy sharing these.
Show us. Who's got time?
Which one? This one or this one? Okay, and I'll give you a choice. Would you like one that is another love song, or would you like one that is like an insult song?
What's everyone voting? Love or insult? Love, Carrie? Oh, there's lots of insults.
Perfect. All right. Okay, this was me I was doing an installation this weekend, and as an installation, I was kind of recording it and testing out AR in the space, and so I made this kind of insult song.
Shut the fuck up, I don't wanna hear you no more. Everything you say is a boring shit. I don't wanna hear you use those words against me. You're a violent piece of shit. Just because you're trans don't mean you're right. Just because you're trans don't mean you're there for the fight. Just because you're trans don't mean you're right. Just because you're trans don't mean you're there for the fight. Yeah, I'm a trans femme and I know I've done wrong. I've been fucked up by trans people all my life. I've been fucked up by cis people all my life. Niggas just fuck you up, that's just life. They just wanna cancel you for the easiest things, and I cancel them too for the simplest things. I want them dead, and they want me dead. So the only thing I do is kill social capital instead. Yeah, and I get them to lose followers, cause I think that will hurt them. Yeah, but
There you go.
I think we need to see the love one as well, though. Come on.
You want to see the other one? Okay. The other one is short. It's kind of a love to like 1990s hip hop a little bit.
Under it. Let me just see what's under it. Quick, let me see what's under it. I wanna see if you're hiding something like Hennessy. Give me drunk on vision. I wanna see. I just wanna see everything you're hiding from me. Open up now clearly, let me see. I come asking dearly, nicely. I'm a nice one, they say. I'm a good one, they say. But they still got the toxic poisons of the world in vain. Holding it up so I can barely breathe. I just know I want you don't leave. This ain't a song about anything, please. Do you hear me say a point or a pressure? Trying to get my words out just clean and fresher. Coming together.
There you go.
Amazing. Thank you so much. There's a couple of little messages here. Are these on Spotify? And we need a collab with Nancy Fu.
So this is the weird thing. It's like for me the plays, like they're not anywhere. Like I don't put them anywhere. Like sometimes I put bits on Instagram, but I don't really put them out. They're just like something that sits with me. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing for play.
Love it. Such wonderful and kind of diverse introductions to play, I think. And like, I'm really excited to unpack this in so much more detail, but thank you so much for sharing your artifacts. I've got a whole bunch of questions that I got prepared, and we're going to start off with some kind of more general ones, and then I've got some more kind of precise ones that might relate to what you've already discussed or might relate to some other things that I prepared in advance. But just to get going, I'd like you guys to kind of tell me, when's the last time that you think you played, and what was that moment? When was it? Who'd like to go first?
Should we go back in order? I don't know. Are they looking at me?
We can be playful with the order as well, but yeah, I'm just curious, like, are you conscious of the last time that you played?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really think about it until, like, you know, I was forced to think about play. But I guess for me, the last time I played, it's been, I think it was in December, which is like, oh my God, it's been so long ago in a way, is, you know, over 1 month. But I got gifted some new books, art books that I really loved. I forget the title now, but it was a book about Japanese art, a specific type of Japanese art where they only showcase like skeletons, demons, death, and is actually really beautiful. And I was just like going through it, and then I was kind of comparing it to other art books that I have, and it was all very visual, which is a bit unusual for me to refer to visuals to play, but I guess because the visuals were so different among themselves, then I was kind of like making thoughts about them, and I ended up, I think, making about like something between 10 to 12 sketches, something really quick just with my pencil, and I haven't actually got to work on any of these sketches, but I loved it so much. And that's me, like I have a million sketches, and then one time I will go through them and kind of just re-examine them and maybe pick one to work on even further. But to me, that freedom where I have no time constraint, no budget constraints, any of that, to me, that is also the idea of play. And again, like as it happens, again, I was gifted these books, which makes it even more meaningful to me. And I feel like people give me books quite a lot. That's my biggest nightmare when I move houses, the weight of the books. But yeah, I have so many, but I love it so much. So I guess that was the last time I played. Yeah, so sometime around December.
It sounds like you get given a lot of books. I'm quite jealous. Like no one gives me any books ever. I have to go and buy them. Who are these?
Yeah, I think
give me books too.
Yeah, since I moved into my new place, the only thing I've done is spend money on books and trying to make the coffee table like 10 out of 10. So
Yeah.
like I definitely I hear that. I need some gifting as well. But that was a very adult reply to play, I didn't want to go first because I think mine is really childish. I think anyone who knows me, I'm probably infantilized myself a little bit. Like play for me is kind of connected, I guess, a little bit to productivity or to like doing stuff. So like even when I went to the shop this morning, I embarrassingly have an electric scooter. I've had it for like 5 years, so like before everyone else, but like I have an electric scooter. And then I'd say play otherwise is like, I guess I embed it into little actions. Like I went for a run last week. I'm trying to do it more, so I need to get onto it this week. I missed the one I was supposed to do this morning. But I've had this game since I was 7 years old where like, if I'm like running or walking on the pavement and a car's passing by, I like gain a point if I'm stood behind the car when the car passes, and I lose a point if I'm not. So it kind of like makes me get places faster and push myself a bit more. So I tend to have these little weird games that sit in the back of my mind with everything I do, just to make everything a bit more like exciting and productive maybe.
That's so interesting. Like I've never thought about play as like a form of being productive, but like the way that you've done it is really fun. And I think I have like a vague memory of doing something quite similar, like forcing myself to kind of beat something, but I couldn't beat obviously like a car, it's impossible. But I love that. That's wicked. Often we associate productivity with something quite negative, so I think it's nice that you've positioned it in that way. How about the rest of you guys? Oh, like when's the last time you played?
I feel like I play every day, and I really connect with what you just said, because I love gaming culture and computer games, but I'm not a gamer. I'm too ADD and like but I definitely sort of game in real life. And what you just said about walking down the street, I feel like especially the last year, like in the pandemic, where there's all these new elements of things that you have to be thinking about, like keeping a distance to people, or like just being more aware. Like I'm always like hyper aware of everything around me all the time, like a bit too much. So like I feel like I definitely have felt like I'm in some computer game at points the last couple of years, and just trying to like get through the just to get to the supermarket or get on the bus or whatever. But also I think I should probably say now, I have a condition called ME that is a neurological condition, and it affects how much I can work, and so also sometimes my mobility. So for me, play is really important, because interesting you said that play for you is like about movement, but at the time like I have to really limit my movement, so I'm like playing in my mind like all the time. Like I meditate and kind of, I've always like naturally like daydreamed and like and be in my imagination, but now I sort of do it in a more structured way, I guess. And yeah, I'm also just gonna say I'm like a full weirdo. Like I play with everything. Like I'll be like playing with a dog or a cat in the street, or like a little beetle, and like or like playing with the light, just like tripping out on the light. I just feel like it's just such an important part of my everyday and getting through the day. So yeah.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Carrie. Do you feel like since you got maybe diagnosis, has it changed your perception of physicality versus like mental play, or has it kind of always been something that you've kind of been aware of in a way? Like,
I actually got diagnosed when I was 21, so I've had it throughout my career, but it's just changed in the levels of it, so it's like a lot more severe now. So yeah, but I've never been a very physical, I like to dance, but like I've never been like an athlete or anything, so like I don't know how much it's, and I've never played like in like group team, like played in that way, so everything that I do physical is actually very solo. So like, whether it's swimming or like, I guess dance is different, but you're like
I'm sticking with it though. I guess
yeah.
one of my aspirations for this year is just to protect my peace. I think so often when we're playing or just like working or doing anything, we're always like exerting so much energy into everything. So actually like really yeah, knowing your boundaries and your limits like is a perfect way to know how you can function at your best, right? Like the best briefs are the ones with the tightest box to work in, and in fact it's a better space to play in. So that sounds pretty cool. I might take some notes.
That's I'm really glad you said that, because actually that's something I've had to learn, that because my condition is about energy. Energy is not just physical, you're giving energy all the time, whether it's yeah, like emotional or cognitive. And so yeah,
I like this idea of like constriction as a kind of a way to kind of really kind of push the way that you play and think about things. So yeah, I love that. And also this idea of like energy and linking energy to like how we maybe associate with others, but also with ourselves and our minds and our creativity. So that's really fascinating. Amazing. And oh, Danielle, you've changed. And when's the last time you played? Is it right now?
Pretty much. No, so I always do this, sorry. So the last time I think I played was actually about 2 weeks ago, when I was doing some filming in a green screen room, and I had to essentially, I had never written a script before, and so for me the idea of writing a script was to make little games that people could play together. And then I would just kind of be the game director. So I didn't necessarily play, but it was fun for me because I would say like, okay, when this person goes here, you have to do this. And there was one game which was, you can look wherever you want, but you can only move every 10 seconds, and the other person can move whenever they like, but they can only walk, and they can only look at one place every 10 seconds. And the idea was for them to catch each other, which obviously didn't happen. But for me, that was like the kind of moment of play that I had the most. But I do play a lot of video games, to be honest. But the thing I enjoy the most is actually putting video games in the hands of people that don't play games, so I can see what games are accessible and not. Because like for part of the practice is that like everyone should be able to play the games that we make. And so we did this whole session where we put every controller in everyone's hand to try and figure out the most accessible controller. And it turned out being a gun, which was awful. But it meant that the next project we made was a gun game that was anti-violent and talked about violence in video games. So it's quite kind of interesting there. But yeah, usually it's just watching other people play in scenarios that don't usually involve them, and try and build something around that would make them actually be involved.
Was this in person or was this online?
This was in person.
Okay, wicked. I kind of wish you'd like curated this conversation now. Sounds like you're really good at making people play and think about play. And this thing about like people who maybe don't necessarily associate themselves as gamers. I think, because I went to the opening of your exhibition, for those who don't know, Danielle's got an exhibition on at the moment. And you kind of force people, don't force them, but you can like play a video game, right? That's the whole purpose. And I have no I'm not a gamer at all. Like, I'm really good at Mario 3, but that's about it. And that's from like the 90s or the 80s. So that's kind of the limit of my experience with gaming. But it does kind of put you on the spot. And it's really fascinating because I think it was also being like recorded and live streamed at the same time. So you get this added pressure of like having to kind of do a good job. I just really like that you kind of considered like the person and their involvement. And I thought that was wicked. Do you want to like talk us through your exhibition at the moment? Because I know that it's on for the next couple of months, right?
Yeah, it's on until, it just got extended on until middle of March, January, February, March. Yeah, I'm so bad with months. Yeah, so essentially I made games because I was tired of people just consuming art passively. And it became really irritating to me that sometimes when you made art, your identity would be the forefront of what they're seeing rather than actually the thing that you're trying to say. And so the reason that we put in game dynamics or like choices was that to make sure that people looked at themselves when they played something rather than looked at other people and didn't see it as an educational experience, but more of like a dive into what you're doing and who you are and how that affects things. And so that's kind of what the whole game or the show She Keeps Me Damn Alive is about. It's about the ideas that a gun is one of the most accessible controllers. Everyone knows how to use a gun and everyone knows how to play a gun game, and that's awful. And it's about basically getting you excited to pick up this gun and then absolutely ripping you apart and saying that's terrible. Why are you doing this? Why do you think it's so easy to shoot in games? And then telling you that you have to shoot to protect Black trans people, and then not telling you who is Black and trans and letting you fail. And so it's about failing and not really succeeding. And often people are saying, oh, you can't win, but you can, you just have to try harder. But that's the idea of the show. And hopefully it works.
I mean, I definitely failed when I tried. It wasn't good.
I say that I love the idea that you're forcing people to fail. I think that's so deeply connected with the idea of play. I think, for example, for me, not making things is actually more playful than making things. And some people might see that as a fail, when I guess in the industry is like, if it's successful, if you think of something and you end up making something out of that, something that you've thought of. But I think actually kind of allowing yourself to fail, allowing yourself to make those mistakes, or allowing yourself to think of ideas that might not really have a future, it's all related to the idea of play. And yeah, I just value that so much. Yeah, I guess fail, it's a massive component of play.
Yeah, at this agency I used to work at, they've got these like little principles and mantras, and one of them is embrace failure. Because I think we so often, especially in this age where we're connected to social media, I don't want to take us down the social media route because I'm sure everyone has a lot to say. But I think in a world where we're so visible and interconnected all the time, a lot of people don't actually give themselves the space to fail. And it's so important to do that and to like, I think that's why play is important as well, because it means that you kind of like pull yourself away from the outcome a little bit. You're just really just imagining something new. And yeah, I've really loved seeing that in your work as well, Danielle. I remember seeing your first piece the first piece I saw was at Babes' grad show. And it was just like so arresting in the way that it subverted the way that like I was interacting with it and being so careful with how I moved through something. It was an interesting spin on play, which I really liked.
I think what's super important here is this idea of like mistake making as part of play, because like when we were kind of iterating or coming up with the idea of this theme, that really stood out to us, was this idea of like giving ourselves the space to actually make a mistake. Like we're so caught up with things being perfect all the time that actually you miss out on some of the kind of those mistakes that can really lead to something really exciting. And that is one of my questions actually. I mean, one of the ones I wrote down was this idea of like, playing allows us to, like I said, make mistakes. It takes the kind of preciousness out of an experience. And I was just wondering if you can like tell me of an example when playing led you somewhere you hadn't expected it to. So kind of this idea of mistake making and how it kind of actually put you in a better place than you thought you would be. Does anyone have any examples?
When I was doing my brand, I did digital print. I was one of the first designers to do digital print in menswear, and it meant that I could put anything on a garment, and that was so exciting to me. It could be a photograph, it could be a 3D object, it could be text, video stills. So like, but I wasn't great at Photoshop, so I was making a lot of mistakes. And also it was back in the day, so like everything was really slow. Like I was making files that were like 5 meters wide, and like sometimes it would take like an hour to open the file. So like it was a lot of mistakes were made, but it kind of became part of the aesthetic. And there was a lot of glitching, a lot of like just really playful using of the tools or wrong using of the tools. And yeah, it kind of ended up defining my aesthetic.
That's so interesting, because your aesthetic is in itself very playful. And for those who don't know CassettePlaya, I 100% recommend you go and check out Carrie's amazing designs and work. But there is such a like strong sense of playfulness that comes through, and it's cool that you're saying that like this kind of graphic design, or your lack of graphic design skills or use of technology like actually accentuated it. But for you, Teresa, I know that you obviously, I guess through the lens of digital culture, you must be kind of experimenting and in that sense also making mistakes along the way. Would you agree that it's led you down some unexpected routes?
Yeah, I think every time I decide that something is not, quite finished, something is not quite in the right place, I guess that could be considered a mistake. But I guess I don't see mistakes as failure, but it's more as within the practice. I see it more as a chance to explore that concept further, or to just push more and more. And I guess like one thing that's kind of like a downside to what I do, this keep on pushing for concepts and research and stuff, is that my timeline is horrible. Like sometimes something takes me maybe even a month and a half to make, and to me that's sustainable to my practice and that's sustainable to the way I work, but I know that this is not sustainable in, I guess, the industry. So I guess in a way it is a failure, the fact that I take so long to make things, but to me that's just how it naturally should unfold, the process for me, for my personal things. Just, yeah, I take lots of time. If I'm not settled on something, I will keep on pushing for it, maybe even, go back to the very skeleton of the structure of how things, the project I'm building. But yeah, I guess just allowing myself more and more time. I guess, yeah, time is huge for me. I like to take my time doing things.
Would you say that your the way that you approach, I guess, creativity has changed from when you were a student to when you graduated? Because I know that a lot of students that I talk to, they're really into like ticking the boxes, making sure that they're getting the best grades, but actually then you miss out on making mistakes. Mm-hmm. Is there any advice, or can you talk through like how that iteration has changed for you?
I think actually it has changed for the worse, and I'm trying to go back to the way I used to make things when I was on the course. I think especially because I graduated a few months before the pandemic. Then when we went into the pandemic, all the timeline were so rushed. All the projects were happening so quickly. There was no time to think. There was no time to explore anything. And all the projects that were thrown at me, for example, to me, it's just like the people that were giving me this project, they had these ideas in there for a while and they had no real connection to the actual project that we were making. It was more like a visual concept that they just wanted to actuate, and that was it. And I found myself working on these projects back to back for over 2 years now, and it's been really exhausting and a bit draining, whereas where I was in uni, I was exploring so many different things beyond the medium, beyond the concept. And that's how I like to work. And I guess like just going back to what Carrie said, I also was not a very active child. I used to be really ill until I was like maybe 14, 15. So I used to be kind of forced in bed. And that's maybe where my idea of playing comes from, me traveling with my imagination and thinking in depth about concept. And my background until coming on creative direction for fashion is actually in humanities, so it's like literature, philosophy, all these things. So I guess for me, am a bit more brainy when it comes to making things, and especially because 3D takes so much time to make. To me, everything has to start from my brain, my imagination, planning things, exploring things, either in writing or in concept, and then I can make things. So to me, that's my idea of play. And yeah, it goes a bit against what the industry maybe is pushing for. So it's really hard for me to find a balance. I'm still working on finding a balance between the two. So yeah.
It's that thing where you have to like kind of like undersell and over deliver so that you can actually have the space to actually play with things. Because I really agree with you in that sense of like having to like really make it. Like I live by the phrase, make it, break it, iterate it. You just have to make the mistakes and keep on moving. And I think it's really weird how like in like industry, whatever that is, you know, it spreads across many different markets and like practices and stuff. One thing that we have missing, especially when it comes to kind of maybe the creative industry, is this like facilitation of like psychological safety. I think like sometimes the best ideas that come out of any project are the ones that came out by mistake. Someone felt comfortable saying the stupidest idea in the back of their head, and somehow it was the one that resonated with everyone. And I don't think we do enough work to make sure that that can always be the case, to make sure that everyone can actually like voice their points and thoughts in a space that allows play to manifest and develop into something really tangible and beautiful. And like, yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame. I think there's one thing I like to do in my practice is like, how can we like foster that psychological safety and make sure that like people are in groups where they feel safe and that they're building things that they want to and feel no way about it, because it's important. It's really important.
Yeah, I guess a way where I combine like the idea of playing with the practice despite the tight deadline is with the team that we hire. It's always people that we feel comfortable working with. They feel comfortable working with us, and it's also very collaborative. Like even if maybe I am in charge of the team, the conversation has to occur amongst all team members, and everybody tries to bring in their thoughts. And this way we kind of stretch always the pre-production timeline where everybody's kind of jumping in, but I can't work any other way. Like I always try to push for everyone to bring in their ideas, and we make something out of collaboratively working together.
I love that. I was going to actually probe if you could, Nate, define what you mean by psychological safety.
Psychological safety, just that you could say anything. I think it like everyone's always in a room trying to like say the right thing at the right time, not speak over each other and assume, do I sound smart enough? Do I sound dumb enough? Like what? There's so many things that race through our minds. I only just found out that I have ADHD recently, so it explains why I've got like a million thoughts going through my head all the time. But I have like so many thoughts that go through my head all the time, and some of them might be killer ideas, some of them might not be. But I think the important thing in a space, in a group, if you're working with most people, is to kind of create the space for them to let all of those thoughts out. You have to kind of like foster the fact that there's no such thing as a wrong answer. You can butt in whenever you want to. Like you all have autonomy and agency to kind of like navigate where things move to. And making sure that people feel like empowered with that, because so often like people, especially when it comes to the working world, if you're working in commercial creativity, it's like the jobs are given to agencies, but the real job is not to be an agency, it's to give agency, it's to encourage people to actually like take part and develop things together. So yeah, I try to see how I can do that. I think there are moments where, yeah, I'm quite human and I'm scared about the quality of the work that's going to come out, or what role I should be playing, if I should be playing more of a role, especially because I work with like quite a lot of like different stakeholders and people and things that I do. But I'm learning to get through that, and I'm trying to learn how to be a bit more vulnerable with that as well, because that in itself is another form of psychological safety. But I think my therapist will help you with that one. Yeah.
I hope so. Actually, really nice. One of my questions around community and how play can impact community and identity as well. And I think, Nate, you're a really great example for this in terms of what you've done with Gaia's Garden. I'll get you to talk into that in a second, but this is open to everyone. Like, I'm just wondering, do you feel like that play allows you to kind of reconnect in new ways, perhaps? And also what you feel the impact of the future of the community or your identity is through this notion of like play, and this can be explored through IRL or even URL. And I just really feel like this question is probably really useful for like Danielle and also for Nate to answer. But let's maybe start with Nate, perhaps.
So how can play, sorry, one more time.
Or just your thoughts on like how play impacts community. And I know that that's something that you are really active in. And maybe you can explain a bit about like things like Gaia's Garden and other things that you've been working on.
Yeah, so Gaia's Garden, I don't know how to best explain it, but if you type in on Instagram anyone like Gaia's Garden, Garden LDN, I'm just gonna put it in the chat. But essentially it is one of 4 projects that came out of this culture incubator that I came up with a couple of years ago, or 2020 pandemic. Feels like forever. But it was, yeah, one of 4 projects. There's still 2 more to go. I'm really excited for. But it was headed up by Noga, who was a UK student climate activist. And the idea was like, how can Noga, with 5 young women who felt like their practices like spanned across like filmmaking, dance, PR, design, singing, and tech, create like an ecofeminist space that nurtures sustainable practices in new ways. And so one thing led to another, and we're working with a developer to develop this space that we had like a performance space on a stage, we had a workshop space and a garden, and some like commissioned artworks inside it. Where we kind of like, we're talking about sustainable practices. I think so often we talk about sustainability being about consumption and about materials, but there's a lot more to it. I think it's 3-pronged. There's like the ecological, yes, but like also the economical and the social element. Like, are your teams diverse? Like, is this equitable for people so that they can actually engage with it? And these were all things we kind of like battled with and made sure that we brought to the forefront with the space, whether it be like the fact that it was made accessible with a ramp and every single bit of programming was free, so that anyone could come, because you could walk across London into Central and come to everything, or that the programming itself spanned everything from doing like these vegan climate cafes where we talked about our current anxieties with the climate and what's going on in the ecological crisis between generations, or parties with Trippin where we had like a panel discussion, but also like DJs playing and stuff. And it was just a really nice space for people to just share and have these conversations about like what we need to kind of combat around the climate crisis. And it was beautiful. I think the thing that fostering play and community for me with that as an example was more about safeguarding, if I'm honest. I think there's big forces out there doing lots of different stuff. And for me, I like to facilitate and create space for that play, you know, like I think even Play Nice as a name when I came up with it like 6 years ago was more about like where you let people out into, like the spaces and things that you let people go and do, and how you can like set some rules for making that an enjoyable experience. So I was kind of safeguarding to make sure that like everyone had an equitable like way of engaging with us if they developed anything with us, making sure that like anyone who wanted to program stuff in the garden could kind of have a lead to speak to, making sure that there were community leads who looked after everyone during their experience, and like, yeah, just making sure that loads of people felt empowered to kind of like make it something that brought us together. So yeah, it was like my biggest and like, yeah, my life-changing project for me. But I would say I foster play by determining and imagining the times in which we interact with each other and giving other people the ability to do that too.
That's amazing. So using play as a tool for equity and building equity and reconnection.
Yeah.
So, and Danielle, I'd love to hear about this idea of community. And I know that you do so much for like the Black trans community. Maybe you could tell us a bit more about what play means to you, and maybe even for identity as well. I don't know, but I'm just curious to hear more.
Yeah, well, so I kind of started off with us wanting an archive I was looking through the archives and there weren't really any images of Black trans people, no first-hand accounts, and all the images were really horrible and quite violent. And so we set up this group of Black trans people, and they were all just random Black trans people, and we said we want to make an archive. What should we build? And then we said, oh, we want to, do this, do that, design our characters, whatever. And then the question came about saying, okay, how can we make this very accessible? So if I was a Black trans person and not involved in the project, I could find it. And so we said, oh, we could just name it Black Trans Archive and put it on Google, put it online. And then they said, oh, that's great. But then how do we make sure that if you're Black and trans, you see certain things, and if you're not, you don't? And then that's how this whole kind of choice of gaming came about. So even what I make now has come from that community, has come from the conversations with that community. And it wasn't my ideas, and I'm not going to take any credit for that. It was coming from the conversations that we have. And that happens every single time with the choice of engine we use, the process, and how much time we have. It's all determined on them and on what they want to do and on what they think is best, and letting people that have never touched technology or the idea of designing something do that, do exactly that, and just jump straight in, because you start to realize that a lot of these things are just innate and people just need the chance to do it. And so that's kind of what I love to do, is just kind of facilitate. A lot of my practice is just facilitating and making sure that people have the space to do something that they don't often get to do. And I'm just there with the know-how of how to make it work, and just come in as a director at the end and say, right, how am I going to fit in that you wanted to design a squid and this person wanted to design a Black trans planet? I need to make this work. So that my job is to make the story throughout make sense and kind of make it coherent. And so, yeah, for me, it's always based around community, but it's always based around ensuring that people within those communities feel like the things they have to say are valuable. And it's not just about hearing it, it's not just about having it said, but it's about like literally giving them a contract and saying, you are this person, you are now creative director for 2 months. That is your job. We are very happy to have you. You have never done it before. That's completely fine. But after this, now you can say you have been a creative director of a project. And it's about giving people these titles and not worrying too much about ego or anything like that, and saying part of the process of this is making sure the community members can actually call themselves something that they've wanted to be, and just not being given an opportunity. So I think crediting is a really big thing. We don't really often talk about it, but sometimes it's really good to give people more credit and give them a chance to choose something that sounds extremely official, even if none of you know what that really means. Just because then they can put it on their CV, and then it extends beyond you and beyond your work. And I've always talked about how often people are very scared about stealing, and they're saying like, I'm really scared that my work's gonna get stolen. But I've always talked about how I love stealing. As in, like, I don't want to steal stuff, but I think if people steal what I'm doing, I'm very happy, because I want a Black trans person to come along and say, I can do what you do, but way better. And I'm gonna be like, great, do it. Because I think that often we hold ourselves too high. We think too much of ourselves, and that sometimes doesn't allow someone else to then kind of use what you do as a learning experience and play with the things that you have done in order to make something even better than you. So that's kind of my ideas around building that kind of community.
That's powerful. Like this idea of like, preciousness and non-preciousness, I think is so fascinating, because often there's such a hold on like, it's yours, like you identify it as being something that you made, so you have ownership on it, but actually letting go of that is really interesting. You can see like Nate nodding in the corner.
It's like no one can steal the way that you do something, but they can steal the aesthetic, but it's the way you do it. It's like, if the way you do it is unique, it doesn't matter what you're touching, it's going to be unique. And that is the important thing that no one can take away. But if you're so worried about the aesthetic, it's like, then make it just so unique no one can even touch it. It's the way you're doing it, not the end product. And if you're starting to think about like oh, it's just the end product. It's like, no, then you're just in that kind of circle of capitalism where you're like, no one can touch, I don't want anyone to name themselves happy company because I have, trademarked those words, something like this.
Yeah, and there's no such thing as an original idea, is there? Like, everyone likes to think that they're like the provocateur of truth, but we all have our inspiration somewhere, whether it's like this hand or this artwork we're creating, or like this thing we think is a volcano, or like the books that we read. Like, everything we are is the making of something that's been already. So it's important not to be precious about that, and to like instead actually democratize and share like the things that kind of like make us unique, because then people can pivot off it. You can't just be the one standing like shining star. Like, it's mad.
And I think also the idea of play doesn't need validation. So if you know that you've created something that you are happy with and that it's your own product, you're not going to be worried about somebody else either ignoring you or stealing it, because you are satisfied with what you've created, and that should be it. Otherwise, it's not play anymore. It's not fun anymore. It's just you trying to get somebody's attention or, achieve something for yourself beyond the pure idea of you exploring different things.
I was just gonna say that what I think why I've been so connected to online communities is there's always so much sharing, and sharing of information and of skills, and like from the early days of the internet, and like through to like open source networks, and now we're in like metaverse. I feel like I just wanted to say that. And I'd like to see more of that in the real world.
Yeah, I love especially, I know there's a question about 3.0 that we're going to get into as well, but like Web 3.0, the metaverse, not too sure what my place in the metaverse is, but like Web 3.0 itself, like I'm seeing things like Friends with Benefits, which is a DAO, which is a decentralized authority organization, something like that. Autonomous, that's the one. And like seeing how people are able to actually skill share within it equitably, and how things like blockchain allow us to really trace exactly where things have come from. I think like the future for like this culture of sharing on the internet is only going to get a lot better, and it's like so important for us to maybe like foster a bit more humanity into these things, because they're tools at the end of the day. And we all know that the digital space is such a double-edged sword, but it has the potential for like greatness.
For sure. Actually, there is a question about Web3, but we're kind of coming to the end of the time. I know it's gone so quickly. And I would love to kind of unpack Web3, but actually I wanted to just put one last question out there. And if you could give advice to creatives, students, anyone that's watching, what do you, with regards to play, what could they do to play more, big and small ways? I know you've mentioned a few things already, but is there anything that stands out that you could advise on?
I guess for students, like being sort of fresh out of uni, is really the idea of collaboration. And I say this every time I get to speak to students or anyone that's still in uni. I try to collaborate so much with people on my course. And over the last year, I worked on projects with lots of other people, and I had conversations with other people that also informed my own project. And I am still in touch with people who are still in uni, and we talk about things, and that is so important, because I like, the information and knowledge exchange that happens is just invaluable. And I think, again, beyond the industry sort of like, potential benefits that you might have later, is just really like the community that you create and the conversations that you have, and also the variety of experiences that you get to learn about, and the variety of interests that you come across. And it's all about growing yourself as a person, growing yourself as a creative, and also, I guess, growing the sense of community that you might have by connecting with other people. I think that's so important, especially for new generations of creative, knowing that you're not alone when you end uni and you get to start working in the real world. I guess, community, it's really important in the passage from being a student to being a working professional.
Yeah, I just want to like jump off the back of that as well. I think I'm in a weird place in life with the word community at the minute, because I think a lot of people conflate it with audience. Like a lot of people say community, but they mean like they mean their fans, or they mean the people that they're trying to sell stuff to. And so I feel very jaded about it, but I think like the powerful way to actually like achieve that thing you were saying of like getting people to connect on mutual terms about there being some need to like build a product out of it is by building ritual. I think that is the one thing that really brings communities together. Communities are built on like shared values, and once you build a ritual around that shared value, you're able to actually kind of create a lower barrier to entry that allows people to connect and bring completely different things to what you're trying to build, which I think is really beautiful. And I think with Guy's Garden that worked really well, because at the end of the day, people either came to talk about sustainability or to do some gardening or to like just chill. So like lower your barriers to entry. There's a really amazing creative called Andy Orick who sent me this link, which is like a ritual toolkit you can use to build a new ritual, and in turn, I guess, build your own community. So that's what I would pass on to everyone.
Incredible. Thanks, Nate. Anyone else?
That's one of my favorite words is ritual. I love that you use that. And I think when I was talking about play being primal, that's what I was thinking of. I was thinking about the history of humans and how we've used play and how we learn through play. That's how we evolve.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So go.
I was just saying it's amazing. Ad-libs.
For me, it's like not discounting the little things, and not always trying to jump for the end. Like play happens sometimes when you're given the pressure of doing something, but it's not like the be and all pressure. And so for me, like I started on the cabaret scene and I started doing performances on the cabaret scene. That's how I got into doing things in front of people and like trying to figure out my aesthetic. And something that Carrie said before is that when they made mistakes, they like learned to love them. And I think that's like you learn to love an aesthetic that you don't even understand and no one else understands. And you can only do that through like doing it, then showing it in all manners, like big and small. But you don't just need the big ones to learn. Sometimes the small ones that failed, like the first time I performed, I went on stage, forgot all my words and ran off stage. But on that one, like I learned that like, okay, like this is the way you need to work. This is the way you need to do. And that was kind of my like introduction to like knowing who I am and knowing what aesthetic I can work with and knowing how to function. And so I think it's just like not discounting groups and spaces that you may not think are for you and giving them a shot, and really knowing that the small things also add up to the big things, because you may meet someone on the small thing that will be with you for the rest of your life. Yeah. And it's also like not being afraid to just do something you have no idea how to do. Do it.
Do it, right? Go for it.
I
Yeah.
realized I didn't answer the question at all. Sorry, what were you going to say?
No, go for it, Carrie. Nothing.
I was just going to say, Nate also said my other favorite word, which is vulnerability. And I would say that for all students, like your time when you're studying, it's such a special time, because like, okay, you might have an awareness of what you want to do outside of it and your career or like long-term goals, and that's all really important. But I think in that time, you really need to just, play and be free and allow yourself to be vulnerable, because you have, hopefully, if the institutions are doing their job right, have a safe space to do that and a safe environment to explore and be vulnerable.
Well, timing wise, we're on it. I was going to try and finish like my questions by 1/4 past, and it's exactly 1/4 past, so yes to me. But I'd love to open this up to everyone else who's attending, and if you've got any questions, just pass them along. I can see there's a few in there, and I think Daniel was going to helm the attendee questions.
Yes.
With that.
Thank you, Shanu, so much for such stellar moderation and guidance through this playground, and to the panelists as well, or the players as we're calling you. You know, it's been so amazing hearing these insights, and there's been so many things, you know, popping up just in my own mind in reflection. But something that's really interesting to me is this lots of, within the container of play, there's lots of these tension points, or these kind of almost, not, I don't want to say polarities, but just this energy that kind of pulls you. So when you were talking about time and play, our boundaries for play, it was very much about things like, oh, space makes us feel completely liberated, or, you know, it's so connected to liberation. But then also, Nate, you mentioned that idea of the kind of the excitement around having a really constrained brief, which I guess is not as is liberating, but, you know, being constrained it's a different kind of experience to being totally liberated. And then the state of play, you know, you kind of referenced time periods a lot as well. All of the panelists kind of said, oh, that's a very adult-like response, or childlike response, or primal response. So again, the kind of states of play is just really interesting. Again, that tension between adult or childhood. And then also the mind and body aspect of play was really interesting to me. Just that idea of, a lot of you talked about time travel and the imagination and using your minds to play versus the embodied experience of play, like going on the scooter, or Carrie, you know, the embodied tactile experience of the volcano. So again, having these kind of physical assets or tools or toys that kind of bring about the embodied sense of play connected to the mind. So I don't know, just that was really something that I reflected on listening. But enough about me and more about these wonderful questions that are coming in. Firstly, I just wanted to address, someone asked, will this be recorded? Yes, we're going to record this, and with permission with all the panelists, we'll put it on the LCF YouTube and share it as well afterwards. And this is just a question, I guess maybe Danielle, you might be best placed to answer this, but someone has asked specifically in relation to internships and performance and the performance industry. I guess, would you have any advice kind of coming into the performance industry as a space, or ways to kind of enter into the performance industry?
Can you hear me? Just checking.
Yes, perfect.
So my first question would be which performance industry, because there are like a lot. So I don't know exactly which performance industry they're talking about, but for me, if it's like the art performance industry, like a lot of the people I know started performing at like cabaret bars and just random performance nights. There's a lot of nights where you can perform for free, just to kind of get a touch and go of knowing how to do it and knowing how to be on stage and feeling comfortable being there. Because to be honest, finding how to perform is a completely different thing for everyone. Some people are very like blasé and don't need to learn too much, and some people like me, and I need to know everything that I'm doing at every single moment. But it's also about like hanging around with other performers and seeing how they do it and seeing the work they put in behind the scenes and who they talk to, and what it means to get a performance. Because it's really hard to get a performance. It really is. It's really hard to like get people to want to see you live. But it's about, I think it's about trying to do it first, and knowing that like a internship, and again, I don't know exactly which performance you're talking about. If it's something completely different, I apologize. But an internship maybe isn't the first place to go if you yourself are wanting to perform, because you may not be performing. You may just be wanting to perform at that stage. And so you might be watching someone perform every day, and everything they're doing is nothing like you would do, and you're just seeing all the surrounding. So my advice would definitely be 100% do some yourself, organize some yourself, organize some with your friends, do it online, do it offline. Don't worry too much about it going wrong or you're not knowing exactly what to do, but doing is the best experience in performing, 100%. And yeah, that's it. But if I'm wrong and it's like you want to be a movie star, it's very different. But but apologies. This is the only way I know.
I think that's really good advice. Just do it. Just do it.
And go to loads of auditions if you're wanting to perform. Go to loads of, like, I used to go to so many auditions. I got so many no's. But the best thing is I made friends with the artists who were doing the auditions, and through that I got to do some performances and also see how they organize performances. And so that was really amazing.
Fantastic. There's another question here, specifically about So this is from Owen. Hi, Owen. It's great for you to join us, one of our former students. And he says, do you think the pandemic, with all of the restrictions it brought, both physical and emotional, has created a stronger desire to play, or has it always been there? Anyone want to answer that?
I think it has been, sorry, Carrie, you go ahead.
No, I was just going to refer back to what you said about within a brief, when you've got a tighter box, you like that. I really like that challenge as well, because you can be more creative. So I guess in the pandemic, we were really limited when we were in lockdown, definitely. So that allowed for a lot of creativity, I think. But yeah, over to you.
No, I was totally going to echo that, really. I think like the only thing other than that is like, you know, everyone learned that they feel so much and like need to kind of break through it and do it and work through it in a lot of ways. I think sometimes we see play as like the most exciting of emotions to kind of run to, so that we can express ourselves in new ways. It's kind of like this little catalyst so that you can express and enjoy yourself. So I think it's a lot of what everyone's moving towards, yeah, just as a starting note. But I think we need to create spaces for like crying and spaces for like grief. I think like there's been a lot of death. There's been a lot of things that people have lost through the pandemic as well. So I think, yeah, like it's a yes and a no. It's like it's an interesting one. I think we tend to draw ourselves towards positive emotion. So play as an action for that has been definitely something people have pushed themselves towards.
I just wanted to say that it's so funny that you said, I mean, it's not funny, it's funny that you talked about crying and grieving, because I went through a phase during pandemic where all of my artworks were like people crying, like literally. And I'm not an emotional person. I mean, I am emotional within me, but I'm not big on displaying emotions. So it was so funny to me that I was kind of transposing what I was feeling onto my artworks. And I was not really, like, I was not conscious about being in touch with my emotions until somebody was like, why are all of your things like crying face? And I was like, I wonder, like, I don't know. But yeah, so I think that was really curious.
Actually, that was one of my questions that I didn't get a chance to ask, but it was about this idea of, are we allowed to talk about play during a pandemic? Like, does it feel like a taboo to be discussing joy? And this came up in last year's discussion around pleasure activism. But yeah, I'm just curious, just very like in like 2 seconds, do you feel like it is okay to be talking about something like this when we're in the middle of this unknown, ongoing unknown?
I think I saw a comment that was talking about the opposition of play and work in the English language. For example, I think in Italian, if I had to think about it, I don't think the opposite of play would be work, but it would be boredom, which is also associated with the idea of being stillness. So I don't think necessarily that not talking about play, that talking about play, okay, I'm not sure that, how can I put this? I think play is not just about fun, but play is also about moving things. That's what I wanted to get to. So yeah, so I think personally, we should always be playing despite the circumstances, because play moves to moving forward, and play moves to explore, experience new things. So I personally think that, of course, within limit, you know, to the context that you're living in, but I do think that it's so important to always keep that conversation going.
I love that. I think that was also mentioned a lot, that idea of play linked to dynamism, to energy, to movement, to change, which is obviously central to all of our experience right now. So absolutely. And I'm just going to pick up and maybe reflect, and I know we're coming very much to the very end, and I'm so grateful that everyone's stayed for this hour and a half. But it's, I guess, yeah, as you saw, it's all going off on the chat about this language of play. And it's so interesting, again, thinking about the non-English language for play in these terms. But this question of kind of work hard, play hard. Ivan says, I think there's a problem that in the English language, play is positioned as the opposite of work, not the same in many other languages, which feels like it can restrict playfulness in the world of work. Thoughts on the role of language in play. And I'm really interested as well. I think it's so interesting just to hear some of these emergent words like ritual, vulnerability, energy, all of these things that are kind of coming up around this kind of emergent language for maybe radical play 2.0. So I don't know, any thoughts on that in terms from the panelists, just about kind of.
Yeah, I'd say that like us seeing like play and work in proximity to each other is only like highlights the fact that we've grown up in a capitalist society. Like definitely play and boredom sit on the spectrum, but not play and like work. It doesn't have to be work. It doesn't have to be metricized. Things can just exist, and it's like it's important for us to kind of like let it sit in its own space, I think. And yeah, I don't know. There was something else I wanted to say. I feel like I talk too much anyway, so I'm done to hand that over. If anyone else wanted to add anything.
I just wrote in the chat that play doesn't have to be escape from reality, and I mean I definitely use it as that, and in a sort of therapeutic way, but I think that actually can be a really powerful way of confronting realities, and realities that may be quite hard to accept or talk about. And yeah, I think it can be really powerful for change, whether that's like a personal, emotional change, or whether it's a communal, global change.
100%. And that just reminded me as well, it's about like the Emergent Strategy, which I know you've referenced quite a lot, Daniel, as well. I think everyone should read that, by Adrienne Marie Brown. She's a Black feminist from the States, who talks a lot about kind of like how can we imagine our futures? How can we actually like use play and use activism and the movements that we're creating to create the new worlds in ways that like where we do find pleasure. So I'd say everyone should definitely read that book 100%. It's a really, really good one.
Yeah, and I also think that, I don't know, play doesn't have to be synonymous with fun either. Like it doesn't always have to be fun. Like play can be very difficult, it can be very hard. It can be, you're trying to break something that you're usually doing. You're trying to work in a way that you've never done before because you should or you want to try. So like I don't want to get this idea that like play is always fun and it's not work. That's why like play and work are so together, because sometimes you have to play with what you work, and the play becomes the work and the work becomes the play. And so it's not always just fun and like but it's important to know that like when you're trying, at least for me, when I'm trying something new, like that's when I'm playing. Like it may be very difficult and I have to watch all the tutorials and you're like, what is going on? Why is it not working? But that's the play. That's the bit that's like really, really helping and really fun in retrospect. And yeah, so I just wanted to say that.
I think that's such an important point, actually. I think that's also a really great place to maybe start to close off the playground this afternoon. But yeah, I really just want to thank you. I think there's been so many kind of really interesting seeds here anyway for my own self, and I hope for all of our attendees as well, and for you guys as panelists as well. It's so lovely to come together as a micro community, playful community, and let's please keep in touch after this and continue the dialogue. And just to give everyone a bit of foresight, I guess around kind of next steps, actually in the afternoon we have an event online just for students, which again is another radical playground. And that's going to be a space where we kind of go a little bit deeper and get students to really unpack this, and specifically in relation to their own creative practice and some of these themes. So thank you again for all that you shared, panelists, because we're going to take a lot of this into the afternoon session. And then also there's lots of different units that are happening at the university, in the college, and within the school that are really kind of embedding the philosophies that we're talking about. So everything that you've said here is super, super helpful and will be continuously helpful for our continued journey into this kind of space of radical play. So just to say thank you so much, and thank you, Shanu, as well, for such incredible facilitation of the playground.
Yeah, thank you to everyone and panelists, everyone that joined. I just can't say thank you enough. I mean, I've written like about 1 million notes, so I found it super inspiring as well. So just, I can't say thank you enough for your time and letting us discuss play and playfulness. Yeah. Yeah,
and finally, I'd just love to say sorry. I hope that, everyone here can just take something from this hour and a half and just try to embody, that essence or a sense of play, you know, in whatever perspective you connected to, or whatever player or whatever was said, you know, just something to practice, because it is also a skill. When we've lost the capacity to play in our lives, we need to practice it. So, you know, use it as a muscle. Let's build up those muscles for play and really action some of this important things that have come up from today. So onwards and upwards. Thank you all so much. Have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you.
It's been
Enjoy
great.
the rest of the workshops. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.